She used to laugh at him in school. Years later, he found her begging with twins, and what he did changed everything. The girl who laughed and the boy who watched. The city buzzed with the late afternoon hum taxis honking, people weaving through crosswalks, neon signs beginning to blink awake. At the top of a steel and glass high-rise on Fifth Avenue, Gavin Reed stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, staring blankly at the chaos below. 36. Billionaire, founder of one of the most disruptive AI startups in the country. A man who had everything except warmth. His apartment was a museum of minimalism, all black, white, and silver. Not a picture frame, not a memory out of place. His assistant called it sleek. His mother once called it soulless. Maybe both were right. He hadn't noticed the time. The hours blurred together lately calls, meetings, pitches, repeat. But today, something tugged at him. It started with an email from his old high school. Reunion, 20 years. He stared at it longer than he expected, fingers hovering above the delete key. But he didn't press it. Instead, he clicked open the alumni list and scrolled. That name, Sierra Lane. It landed like a ghost. He hadn't thought about her in years. Not since the days when his name meant nothing, and hers was etched on every locker door in pink marker. She was the girl who ruled the hallways, the one who danced on cafeteria tables during Spirit Week, who wore confidence like perfume. And he was invisible, except when she decided to notice him for a laugh. "Read the robot," she used to say, tapping her pen against his temple in chem class. "Does he even bleed?" Her friends would laugh. He'd laugh too, weakly, pretending it didn't sting. But it did. And he remembered. He closed the laptop, feeling foolish. High school was a lifetime ago. He'd changed. Life had changed. He told himself that twice more before leaving for the gym downstairs. But fate doesn't wait for convenient moments. As he turned the corner near Lexington and 59th, his AirPods blasting a podcast he wasn't really listening to, he saw something or someone out of the corner of his eye. At first, it was just the shape of it. A woman huddled against a lamppost, coat far too thin for the November chill. Two small figures clung to her, one on each side. He kept walking, until he didn't. His breath caught. His feet stopped moving. His pulse raced for reasons he couldn't name. It was her. He couldn't explain how he knew. Her face was gaunt, hair dull and tangled beneath a knit beanie. But the eyes, those sea glass green eyes, even rimmed with fatigue, they were unmistakable. Sierra Lane. But this wasn't the version he remembered. Gone was the girl with the silver hoop earrings and biting wit. This woman looked broken. One of the children, twin girls, maybe 4 years old, was crying, rubbing her eyes with a dirt-streaked sleeve. The other clung to Sierra's coat, eyes wide with fear and cold. Gavin's breath formed small clouds in the air. He stood frozen for what felt like minutes. He could have walked away. He should have walked away. Instead, he stepped closer. "Is Sierra?" he said, unsure if the voice that left him was even his. She looked up slowly, eyes narrowing in confusion, then widening in disbelief. Her lips parted, but no sound came. "Gavin?" she whispered. He nodded, his throat tight. "Yeah, it's me." Silence stretched between them, like ice cracking over a lake. Her eyes dropped. She turned slightly as if to shield the girls from him. What happened? He asked gently. She shook her head, voice flat. Life. The child who had been crying whimpered again. Sierra instinctively pulled her close, whispering something Gavin couldn't hear. He didn't press. He reached into his coat, pulled out a business card, and knelt slightly so he was closer to eye level. Come with me, he said. Let me help. No, she said quickly, eyes sharp with shame. We're fine. He looked at the girls, cold, hungry, frightened. You're not. She said nothing. I have a place nearby, he continued. It's warm, safe, just for tonight, for them. Sierra looked down at her daughters. Something in her chest cracked. She was tired, so tired, and her pride had already been trampled more times than she could count. Reluctantly, she nodded. Gavin called for his car, then gently helped her and the girls inside. He sat across from them during the drive, watching Sierra avoid his gaze. The girls curled into their mother's sides, half asleep, too tired to even speak. When they arrived at his building, she paused on the marble steps, hesitating. He offered his hand. Just one night. She took it. In the elevator, her reflection in the mirrored walls made her flinch. Her cheeks were sunken. Her coat smelled of mildew. But the girls, Harper and Zoe, she finally told him, were calm, safe. That was enough. Gavin's penthouse was a world away from her reality. Clean, modern, distant. He showed her the guest room, ordered food, set out fresh towels. She watched him quietly. You didn't have to do this, she said as the girls ate slowly on the couch. Not for me. I didn't, he replied softly. I did it for them. Her walls went up instantly. So you still think I'm, what, not worth it? Just a joke? No, Gavin said, his voice firm now. I used to think you were everything I could never be. Strong, confident, untouchable. Sierra blinked, stunned into silence. You don't have to talk tonight, he added. But tomorrow, I'd like to understand what happened. She nodded slowly. That night, while the girls slept in a warm bed for the first time in weeks, Sierra stood by the guest room window and looked out over the city. And Gavin sat alone in the dark, staring at the old high school photo he found online. Two people, one past, and a future neither of them could have seen coming. From limos to sidewalks, a world apart. Sierra didn't sleep much that night, even though the bed was softer than anything she'd laid on in years. The sheets smelled like lavender. The silence in the penthouse was so complete, it almost felt threatening. She wasn't used to silence. Not like this. For the past 3 years, sleep had always been a negotiation. A corner of an alley, a bus station bench, a shelter with flickering lights and strangers who coughed through the night. Every sound kept her on edge. Every shadow was a maybe. Maybe danger. Maybe theft. Maybe worse. But here, in this silent, pristine world, her mind screamed louder than ever. The girls had fallen asleep quickly. Harper curled up on her right, Zoe on her left. Their little fingers still sticky from the unexpected feast Gavin had ordered. Grilled cheese, hot tomato soup, slices of apple dusted with cinnamon. It was the kind of meal Sierra used to dream about giving them on a regular Tuesday. She stayed awake long after the girls started dreaming, eyes fixed on the ceiling, arms wrapped tightly around both of them. What am I doing here? She wasn't supposed to see Gavin again, and definitely not like this. In high school, he'd been invisible, Skinny, awkward, always carrying a backpack that seemed too big for his frame. He was the type of guy people tripped in the hallway and never apologized to. The one who stayed after class for extra credit no one else needed. She remembered him trailing behind the popular crowd, trying to find the right moment to speak, but never quite brave enough. She hadn't been cruel to him, not intentionally, but she also hadn't been kind. Sierra used to think being admired was power, that boys like Gavin were just background noise in a life that was destined for bigger, better things. Then life flipped the script. She turned over carefully so she wouldn't wake the girls and stared out the dark window. Manhattan glittered in the distance like a constellation of dreams she couldn't touch anymore. And Gavin, the boy she once laughed at, now lived in the sky. Across the hall, Gavin was pacing. Sleep had never come easily to him. His brain didn't rest. It calculated, projected, ran simulations. That's how he built the empire that now paid for this penthouse. The one with 3 empty bedrooms and a kitchen that barely remembered what it was like to feed someone other than him. But tonight was different. He'd brought her here, Sierra Lane, the girl who used to laugh with her friends while he faded into the corners. The one who once dropped a sarcastic comment in front of everyone during lunch and made his ears burn for days. And yet, he couldn't stop thinking about how broken she'd looked on that sidewalk. How small. He told himself it was about the kids. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. He'd worked hard to forget high school, to rewrite the story of who he was. Gavin Reed, venture capitalist, tech wizard, investor in 3 unicorn startups, keynote speaker at Davos, profile in Forbes. But one look at her, clutching those kids on the street, and all of it fell away. He was 16 again, heart pounding, face flushed, stuttering over syllables no one wanted to hear. Why her? Why now? He sat at the kitchen island and opened his laptop, but the screen glowed with no purpose. His fingers hovered over the keys, then dropped. Instead, he reached for his phone and pulled up a private search engine. Sierra Lane, New York City. No recent addresses. No employment history. No arrests. Nothing. She had vanished from the map, but she hadn't disappeared. She'd been falling, and no one had seen it. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the apartment like honey. Warm, slow, unapologetic. Sierra blinked awake to the sound of soft laughter. Harper and Zoe were by the window, giggling at something outside. Maybe the view. Maybe the pigeons strutting across the ledge. Her back ached. Her chest felt heavy with exhaustion. But she forced herself up, pulling her hair into a messy bun and quietly guiding the girls toward the private bathroom, where she helped them wash up with care and caution, like she was still afraid something would shatter if they used too much soap. On the dresser, fresh clothes had been left for all 3 of them. Clean, folded, new. She swallowed hard. There was no price tag, but she could feel one. When they finally stepped into the kitchen, Gavin was already dressed. Sharp charcoal slacks, a navy blue sweater, hair still damp from a shower. He looked like he belonged in a magazine spread. Sierra felt like she'd dragged mud into a palace. "Morning," he said, rising from the stool. "Sleep okay?" The girls ran past her toward the breakfast spread, fresh fruit, waffles, little cups of yogurt. Sierra stood still. "Gavin, I don't know how to thank you, but this can't go on. We'll be gone before—" He raised a hand. "No, you won't." She blinked. What? You and the girls are safe here. Stay as long as you need. She shook her head. I can't do that. This isn't my world. You're here now, and you're not alone. Sierra wanted to scream, or cry, or run, but she did none of those things. Instead, she sat. They ate in silence, except for the girls chattering between bites. When the plates were cleared and the girls retreated to the guest room to play, Gavin turned to her again. Talk to me. Sierra looked down at her hands. They were trembling. She wasn't used to people listening, let alone someone like him. You want to know what happened? She whispered. I wish I had a neat story, a single moment where everything changed. But it didn't work like that. Gavin said nothing, just waited. She took a deep breath. After high school, I thought I had it all figured out. I wanted to be a fashion buyer. I moved to LA, got into a relationship. His name was Marcus. At first, it felt like a dream. But dreams turn dark fast when you're young and chasing stars without a map. Her voice cracked. He left when I told him I was pregnant. Said it wasn't his problem. Gavin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I moved back to New York to be near my mom, but she died 6 months after the girls were born. Cancer. Fast. Brutal. A long pause. I tried everything. Waitressing, cleaning, temp jobs, but with no childcare, no support, it fell apart fast. One eviction turned into another. And then, she didn't need to finish the sentence. Gavin exhaled slowly. How long have you been on the streets? Almost a year. He leaned back, arms crossed, trying to hide how much that hurt to hear. I can't imagine. No, she said gently. You can't. And then, softer still. But you're trying, and that means more than I can say. That night, after the girls fell asleep again, this time with full bellies and clean pajamas, Sierra wandered into the living room. Gavin was sitting on the couch, laptop open, reading something with intense focus. But when he saw her, he closed it. She hesitated. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why are you helping me? His answer came without hesitation. Because I remember what it felt like to be ignored, to be unseen, and I never forgot you. Sierra swallowed hard. Even after how I treated you? Especially because of that. She stepped closer, unsure what she was doing. This doesn't feel real. He smiled, gently. Maybe that's because it's just the beginning. Rebuilding trust. One small step at a time. Sierra didn't know what it felt like to breathe easy. Not really. Even now, inside Gavin Reed's penthouse, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling glass and silent wealth, she found herself glancing over her shoulder more than she should. It was as though any minute, someone would show up, point a finger, and tell her she didn't belong, that this was all a mistake. But no one came. Instead, she found fresh towels, meals prepared without being asked, and soft pajamas folded on the bed every night. Gavin never hovered. He didn't question every move or make her explain the weight she carried in her eyes. He simply made space for her, for the girls, for all the broken pieces she was trying to reassemble. Still, trust doesn't grow overnight, especially when it's been ripped from your hands too many times. On the third morning, Sierra came downstairs to find Gavin already seated at the dining table, reading something on his tablet. He glanced up and smiled. Nothing forced, no pity, just a quiet, steady presence. Morning, he said. Morning, she replied, her voice soft. Harper and Zoe were already halfway through their pancakes, syrup on their cheeks and joy in their giggles. Sierra sat with them, pouring orange juice with trembling fingers. Gavin noticed. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." He didn't push. "If you ever need a break, just time to yourself. I can ask Mrs. K to watch the girls. She used to be a teacher. They love her." Sierra's chest tightened. It had been years since someone had offered her rest. Real rest. The kind that didn't come with guilt or a clock ticking down to the next unpaid bill. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Gavin replied. "Just take care of yourself." That afternoon, for the first time in months, Sierra took a hot bath. Alone, in silence, and she cried. Not from sadness, but from the unfamiliar feeling of being allowed to let go. Later that week, Gavin suggested they take the girls to the park. "Just a short walk. You all need fresh air. Come on, you'll see." Sierra hesitated at first. She wasn't ready to be seen, not by strangers who might judge her, or by the world she used to belong to before everything unraveled. But the way Harper's face lit up at the word swings made it impossible to say no. So she agreed, just this once. The park was quiet that morning, nestled between towering apartment buildings like a secret garden. As the twins ran ahead, Gavin and Sierra walked behind them slowly, not quite side by side, but close enough to feel it. "You're different," Sierra said after a while. Gavin raised an eyebrow. "In a good way?" "In every way." He smiled. "I had to be. Back then, no one saw me. Not really. It used to hurt. But now, I think it shaped me." "You were always kind," she said, staring at her shoes. "I was just too full of myself to notice." "You were young," he said simply. "So was I." They stopped near a bench. The sun was soft on their faces. Zoe was trying to climb the monkey bars, while Harper cheered her on. "Do you remember that day in chemistry class?" Gavin asked suddenly. "The one where you borrowed my notes, promised to return them, and never did?" Sierra covered her face, laughing. "Oh my God. Don't tell me you still remember that." "Are you kidding? That was the first time you ever spoke to me." They both laughed, and something inside her chest, something rusted and tired, unlocked a little. Maybe forgiveness wasn't just about the big things. Maybe it began with shared smiles over silly memories. By the second week, the girls had a routine. Morning cartoons, pancakes, time with Mrs. K, art projects, books before bed. Sierra's routine, though, was more fragile. She still woke up in panic sometimes, heart pounding, convinced she'd missed a shelter's curfew or that someone had stolen their bags. But Gavin's home was quiet, safe. No one knocked unless she expected them. No one raised their voice. One evening, she walked into the kitchen and found Gavin cooking, not ordering food, actually cooking. "You cook?" she asked, leaning on the doorframe. He chuckled. "Only 3 dishes, but I make them well. Pasta, stir-fry, and pancakes." "Pancakes are a dish? When you burn them 3 times, learning the right temperature?" "Yeah, they count." She laughed. "You've changed." He shrugged, plating a batch of garlic, shrimp, and vegetables. "People do, but some parts stay the same." She paused. "Like what?" "Like remembering the girl who walked into homeroom with a yellow backpack and said, 'Everyone better watch out. I'm gonna take over the world.'" Sierra smiled, surprised he remembered. "Yeah, I said a lot of things back then." Gavin looked at her seriously. "Maybe it's time to start saying them again." The next day, a package arrived. It was addressed to Sierra. She opened it carefully, hands shaking slightly. Inside was a brand new laptop, lightweight, sleek. On top was a sticky note in Gavin's handwriting. For your future, because I know it still matters. She stared at it for a long time. Later that night, she knocked on his office door. He looked up, surprised but welcoming. Hey, everything okay? You didn't have to do this, she said, holding the laptop against her chest. It's too much, he stood. No, Sierra. What was too much was what you went through, alone. This is just support. She hesitated. I don't know what I want to do yet. That's okay, he said. You'll figure it out when you're ready. Sierra stepped forward, lowered her voice. I'm scared, Gavin. I know. He didn't offer cliches. He didn't promise everything would be perfect. He just stood there, present, real. And for the first time in years, she felt the stirrings of something more than fear. She felt the first flicker of self-belief. As the weeks passed, Sierra started exploring online classes. She had always dreamed of studying graphic design, but somewhere between eviction notices and cold nights, that dream had been buried. Now, Gavin gave her the space and the tools to dig it back up. Every night, after the girls went to bed, Sierra sat at the kitchen table and worked. Her fingers hovered uncertainly at first, but little by little, her confidence grew. She designed mock logos, learned color theory, watched YouTube tutorials until midnight, and Gavin watched her transform. Not once did he mention the past. Not once did he dangle her pain like a reason to feel guilty. He just believed, quietly, steadily. One afternoon, Harper fell and scraped her knee in the hallway. Gavin was the first to reach her. He knelt beside her, whispering something Sierra couldn't hear. Harper stopped crying almost instantly. Later, when Sierra asked what he'd said, he just smiled and replied, "Magic words. I keep a few saved up." She watched him, then this man who had every reason to walk past her, on that sidewalk, and instead chose to kneel beside her. Not because he wanted to save her, but because he believed she could stand on her own again. And little by little, Sierra did. She scheduled her first interview for a paid internship in digital marketing. She signed up for a CPR class. She took the girls on the subway by herself again. No longer panicked, no longer ashamed. She still had scars, still flinched at sudden noises, still checked her bag twice before leaving a room. But she was rebuilding, not in leaps, in steps. And Gavin, he walked each one beside her, a path that won't let go. Sierra thought the worst was behind her. After weeks of stability, laughter, and the quiet rhythm of safety, she had begun to believe, truly believe, that maybe the universe had stopped punishing her. The girls were smiling more. She had rediscovered parts of herself she thought were long gone. The nights weren't filled with panic anymore, only dreams. But pasts don't stay buried, not when they have unfinished business. It started with a text. She was folding laundry while Zoe and Harper played in the living room. Her phone buzzed on the table. The name on the screen turned her blood to ice. Marcus, the man who had promised her forever and left her with nothing but silence. The father of her children. The man who had vanished before the ultrasound, before the hospital bills, before the eviction. The text was short, almost casual. Heard you're doing better. We should talk. M. She sat on the couch, phone trembling in her hand. Her vision blurred. She hadn't heard his name spoken aloud in over 4 years, and yet it was like his shadow had never truly left. A second message followed a minute later. I'm in town. You owe me that much. Sierra stood slowly, her breath shallow. The room felt smaller, colder. The twins were still laughing, oblivious to the tremor running through their mother's heart. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind looping through 100 different scenarios. Part of her wanted to delete the messages and pretend she never saw them. But the other part, the part that had learned the hard way not to run, knew she couldn't ignore him forever. The next morning, Gavin noticed something was off. She was quieter at breakfast. Her hands shook slightly when she poured juice for the girls, and she kept checking her phone like it might explode. After the twins went to the playroom, Gavin pulled out the chair across from her. Sierra, he said gently, something's wrong. Talk to me. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she handed him the phone. He read the messages silently. His jaw clenched, but his voice stayed calm. Marcus, she nodded. I haven't heard from him in years. He's never seen the girls, never sent $1, never called. And now he wants to talk. Gavin set the phone down. His eyes locked on hers. Do you want to see him? I don't know, she whispered. Part of me wants to scream at him. Part of me wants answers. And part of me wants to protect the girls from even hearing his name. You don't owe him anything, Gavin said firmly. You've raised those girls alone. You've fought through more than anyone I know. He doesn't get to waltz back in like he deserves a seat at your table. Sierra nodded, but her heart was still tangled. Later that day, she stepped out onto the balcony and called him. The phone rang once, twice, then his voice. Hey! She closed her eyes. That voice used to be comfort. Now it was like glass in her ears. What do you want, Marcus? A pause. To see you. To meet them. I made mistakes, but I'm trying to fix things now. You left me, she said, her voice low. You left me pregnant, homeless, terrified. You didn't even reply when I told you about the twins. What do you think you deserve now? I wasn't ready, he replied, his voice defensive. I panicked. I was young, but I've grown. I have a steady job, a place. I want to step up. Sierra's chest burned. You don't step up when it's convenient. You step up when it's hard. When I was sleeping in shelters, begging for baby formula. Where were you? He was quiet, then softly. Please, just one meeting. That's all I ask. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. That night, she told Gavin everything. Every wound, every scar. How Marcus had charmed her, made her believe in love again, then disappeared the moment things got real. How she had walked into labor alone, holding a blanket instead of a hand. Gavin listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. Finally, he said, if you decide to meet him, I'll be nearby. You won't go through this alone. And so, 3 days later, Sierra met Marcus at a small coffee shop near Central Park. She arrived early, nerves churning in her stomach. Gavin had insisted on waiting a few blocks away with the twins. Just in case, he'd said, and somehow that made her braver. Marcus arrived late, dressed in a blazer that didn't quite fit, with the same smirk she remembered and hated. He hugged her without asking. She didn't hug back. You look good, he said, sliding into the booth. Sierra folded her hands tightly. Cut to it. Marcus leaned back. I want to be part of their lives. I know I messed up, but I'm here now. I can help. Sierra narrowed her eyes. Help how? With a few weekend visits? Some child support checks? I'm not saying it'll be perfect, but they deserve to know who I am. She laughed bitterly. They don't know you. You don't even know their middle names. He winced. That's why I'm here. You're here? Because you heard I wasn't struggling anymore, she said. Because someone told you I was living in a fancy building and suddenly you decided fatherhood wasn't so scary. Marcus didn't deny it. Look, he said, voice softening. Maybe I don't deserve them. Maybe I don't even deserve to be here. But I'm still their father. No, Sierra said, standing. You're not. Fatherhood isn't biology. It's bedtime stories. It's hospital visits. It's standing outside ballet practice in the cold. You had your chance. You walked away. She left him there, mouth half open, reaching for something he couldn't hold. When she returned to the park, Gavin saw her coming and stood. She walked straight into his arms. I told him no, she whispered. Gavin nodded. I'm proud of you. Later that night, after the girls were asleep, Sierra sat beside Gavin on the couch. He looked at me like I was the villain, she said, like I robbed him of something. You didn't, Gavin said. You protected them. That's what matters. She rested her head on his shoulder. I'm tired of running from the past. Then stop, he said, because your future looks a lot better. And for the first time, she believed it. Finding home again. For the first time in what felt like forever, mornings were no longer something Sierra feared. Sunlight crept gently into the corners of the house, where the smell of pancakes and fresh coffee filled the air, and the giggles of two little girls danced through the hallways like music. Avery was chasing Lena around the kitchen island, a spatula in one hand, her hair tied up in a messy ponytail. I'm the pancake queen, she declared. Lena giggled, hugging her stuffed bunny tighter, before darting under the dining table. Sierra stood by the sink, sleeves rolled up, flipping pancakes with surprising ease. Gavin leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed, watching them all with a quiet smile. There was something sacred in this chaos, this simple, lived-in joy. This was becoming home. Nights were quieter now, filled with soft bedtime stories and whispered goodnights. On weekends, they played board games by the fireplace or packed sandwiches for picnic lunches in the park. Sierra had even begun painting again, using a small corner of the living room as her makeshift studio. Gavin made sure the girls had everything they needed. School supplies, warm jackets, even a shared swing set in the backyard. People who once saw themselves as broken now found strength in one another. One night, as Gavin tucked the twins into bed, Harper reached out and touched his sleeve. Are you our dad now? She asked, blinking sleepily. Gavin paused, heart clenching. Do you want me to be? The girls exchanged a glance, then nodded. Then I'll do my best, he whispered. Always. He switched off the light and closed the door gently behind him, his chest heavy with something like love real, terrifying, beautiful love. 3 days later, the email came. It was from the board of directors at Novatech, a tech company Gavin had helped grow from the ground up in his early years. They were offering him the chance to lead a groundbreaking project in San Francisco, a dream opportunity, the kind of role that came once in a lifetime, the kind of position that changed everything. Gavin stared at the screen, reading the words over and over again. Lead strategist, full relocation covered, Minimum 2-year commitment. His heart pounded. This was everything he'd worked for. Every all-nighter, every sacrifice, every step away from comfort. And yet, he turned his gaze to the hallway where the sounds of laughter echoed from the living room. Sierra was reading to the girls, something about a lost bunny finding its way home. Gavin closed the laptop and said nothing. For 2 days, he held the secret inside him, torn between excitement and dread. He'd go to work, smile through meetings, then come home and help Sierra with dishes, or carry Avery up to bed. He watched her, how she laughed again, how she stood taller, how she had slowly begun believing in herself. He hated the thought of disrupting it all. But one evening, as they sat together on the back porch under the amber glow of the patio lights, Gavin finally spoke. Sierra was curled under a knitted blanket, her knees pulled to her chest, sipping tea. "You're quiet tonight," she said gently. Gavin took a deep breath. "I got an offer." She looked over. "A job?" He nodded. "Novatech. They want me to lead a new innovation branch in San Francisco." She blinked. "Wow, that's huge." "Yeah, it is." He looked at her, at the way her expression didn't crack, but her grip on the mug tightened just a little. "And you'd have to move. In 3 months, for at least 2 years. A long silence followed. Sierra kept her eyes on the horizon. "That's amazing, Gavin. I mean, really, I'm happy for you." He reached for her hand. "Don't do that. Don't act like this doesn't affect you." She swallowed. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to know. If I go, I'm not going alone." His voice softened. "I want us to be a family, no matter where." Sierra's heart trembled. She wanted to believe him, but a familiar fear crept in. The same fear that came with being left behind, with being replaced, with not being enough. "I just don't want to be the reason you stay and regret it later," she whispered. "You're the reason I even care about staying," Gavin replied. She smiled faintly, but her eyes were far away. 3 mornings later, Sierra opened the front door and found a letter on the porch. The envelope was thick, embossed with a silver legal seal. Her fingers trembled as she read the name. Marcus J. Bishop, Plaintiff. Sierra L. Brooks, Defendant. Petition to seek full custody of minor children. The words blurred as her breath caught. She stumbled into the hallway, clutching the letter like it had burned her. Her vision spun. She dropped onto the couch, the paper falling from her lap. Harper and Lena were coloring at the kitchen table. Marcus was trying to take her daughters, claiming she was unfit, claiming she lived off others, that she lacked stability, that she had exposed the children to unfamiliar and potentially unsafe environments. Her past was being twisted into a weapon against her. Gavin found her there. An hour later, pale and silent, the letter sat on the coffee table, opened and cruel. "What is this?" he asked, scanning the pages. His face darkened. "He did this? Now?" Sierra nodded, numb. Rage flashed through Gavin's eyes. "He's not taking them." She looked up. "How can you know that?" "Because I won't let him. I'll get you the best attorney in the state. We'll fight this." But Sierra didn't respond. Instead, she stood and walked into the kitchen, opening cabinets as if looking for something. Her movements were slow, uncertain. "I can't put you through this," she whispered. "What?" "This. Court hearings, custody battles, lawyers, me. I'm a mess, Gavin. I always have been, and now I'm dragging you into it." He stepped forward, No, you're not dragging me anywhere. I'm here because I want to be. She turned to face him, eyes glassy. Maybe you shouldn't be. The words cut through him like ice. Gavin stared at her, disbelieving. You really believe that? I don't want to ruin your life, she said, voice trembling. You have everything ahead of you. A real job, a future. Why would you stay here for someone like me? Because you're not someone like you. You're Sierra, and those girls are everything. But she shook her head. You don't owe us anything. I don't owe you, he said, voice cracking. I love you. The silence that followed was thick with unsaid things. She didn't say it back. He stepped back slowly. If you need space, take it. But don't push me away because you're scared. I've fought too hard to lose this now. She looked down. Maybe I'm just too tired to fight anymore. That night, Gavin sat alone in his office. The door cracked open, the stars outside blurred by city lights. His laptop screen glowed in front of him. The Novatech contract still unsigned. On his desk sat the custody letter and a photo of the girls at the zoo last weekend, grinning ear to ear with ice cream on their faces. Sierra stood behind them, hand resting protectively on their shoulders. He looked between the two paths, two futures. One demanded everything he had ever worked for. The other, everything his heart now longed for. The question settled in the room like a whisper. What is the price of the life I want? And is it worth losing the people I love for it? And in the quiet that followed, Gavin Rhodes finally realized that every dream came with a cost. But not every cost was worth the dream. The fight for what matters. The storm came 2 days later. Not from the sky, but from inside. It started with a phone call. Sierra had just stepped out of the shower, towel wrapped around her, when her phone buzzed on the sink. The name flashed across the screen like a ghost she thought she'd buried. Marcus. Her heart dropped. She stared at it, frozen. It rang until it stopped. Then came a message. Be ready. The hearing is scheduled. You're not going to win this. Her knees buckled. She slid to the floor, the damp towel pooling around her. The air suddenly felt too thin to breathe. In the living room, the girls were building forts out of couch cushions, oblivious to the storm gathering outside their world. Sierra didn't tell them. She didn't tell Gavin either, not right away. She needed time to understand what this all meant. But the truth had a way of rising to the surface, whether she was ready or not. That night, Gavin found her sitting on the edge of the bed, still dressed in her clothes from earlier, staring blankly at the floor. I talked to my attorney, he said gently. He's already reviewing the petition. We'll respond by Friday. Sierra didn't look up. Sierra. Gavin sat beside her. We'll fight this. I promised you. I know, she whispered. That's the problem. He blinked. What do you mean? You're throwing yourself into a war that's not yours. He frowned. This is our family. Of course it's mine. She stood up, pacing, her arms crossed tight around herself. But it wasn't supposed to be. You had a life before we came along. A plan. A future. Gavin stood too. And then that changed. I changed. Isn't that what people do when they find something that matters more? Sierra turned to him, her voice brittle. Do you really want to give up everything you've worked for? That job in San Francisco, that was your dream. I thought it was, Gavin said softly. But now, I don't know anymore. Sierra's voice cracked. Don't say that like it's a good thing. Don't give up your life because you feel responsible for mine. He stepped closer. This isn't responsibility. This is love. She looked up at him, tears brimming in her eyes. You can't love someone who doesn't even know how to stay whole. Gavin's voice was calm but firm. Then I'll help you put the pieces back. Sierra shook her head, backing away. I don't want to be another reason you stay stuck. I don't want you to regret me. Gavin stared at her, heart aching. You think I'd regret building a life with you? I think, she whispered, you don't realize how much you're giving up. He looked away, jaw clenched. Maybe, but I know exactly what I'd be losing if I left. The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. The days blurred together in a haze of legal meetings, paperwork, and cold dread. Marcus's legal team was relentless. They painted Sierra as unstable, dependent, unreliable, a woman who had failed to provide her daughters with a safe, consistent home. They submitted photographs, employment records, housing instability reports from the past 4 years. Sierra sat through the deposition quietly, her fingers trembling as she clutched the edge of the table. She'd never felt so exposed, so small. Gavin was beside her the entire time, his hand never leaving hers. When the hearing ended that day, he didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms and held her. Back at home, the girls were still too young to fully understand what was happening, but they could sense the tension. Why are you and Mommy so quiet lately? Lena asked Gavin one evening. He knelt beside her, brushing hair from her face. Sometimes grown-ups have to fix hard things, but we always fix them better when we have love. She nodded solemnly. Like glue? Exactly like glue. One evening, Sierra found herself alone in the backyard. It was late, almost midnight. She stood barefoot on the cool grass, arms wrapped around herself, staring up at the stars. She didn't hear Gavin come out until he was beside her. I know what you're going to say, she murmured before he could speak. Do you? That I'm shutting you out again. That I'm scared. That I'm pushing you away when I should be letting you in. He said nothing for a moment, then spoke gently. I was just going to say, I miss you. She turned to him, eyes shimmering. I'm still here. I know, but part of you isn't. She looked down. I'm tired, Gavin. Tired of always having to fight to prove I deserve to keep my own kids. Tired of trying to pretend I'm not afraid of losing everything again. Gavin stepped closer. You don't have to pretend with me. She looked up at him, voice breaking. What if this is the part where you realize I'm too much? Gavin cupped her face in his hands. Then I'd fight harder, because you're worth it. They stood there for a long time, the night quiet around them, only the rustle of leaves above. Then Gavin whispered, I'm not going to San Francisco. Sierra's breath caught. What? I turned it down. Gavin, I'm not leaving you. I'm not leaving them. We'll find a new dream together. But I'm not chasing something if it means running away from what matters most. Her tears spilled then, and this time, she didn't hide them. She let him hold her, and for the first time, she believed, really believed, that they could survive this. Together. The next morning, Sierra sat down at the kitchen table with her daughters, helping them color, while Gavin made coffee. Harper leaned over and whispered, Mommy, are we okay now? Sierra smiled, her voice steady. Yeah, baby, we're going to be okay. Gavin watched them from the kitchen, and though the fight wasn't over, he knew they were no longer facing it alone. And sometimes, that was enough to keep going. Her voice, his stand. The courtroom smelled like paper and tension. Rows of polished wood benches stretched out under sterile lights, and the air buzzed with whispered conversations and shuffling papers. Sierra sat stiffly between her attorney and Gavin, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. Across the aisle, Marcus sat with his legal team sharp suits, confident postures, rehearsed expressions. He looked at Sierra only once, with that same smug smirk that had once made her stomach twist in fear. But not today, not anymore. She looked away, focusing instead on the judge entering the room. The bailiff called the case. Everyone rose. This was it, the first day of the custody hearing. The prosecution began with a strategy as brutal as it was expected. They tore into Sierra's past, her eviction notices, her unstable employment history, the months she and the girls had spent living in shelters or on the streets. She cannot provide a consistent environment, Marcus's lawyer said, pacing the courtroom like a predator. She has depended on the charity of others, including one, Mr. Gavin Whitmore, who is not legally related to the children. This is not a foundation for healthy development. Gavin sat, fists clenched in silence. But Sierra, she surprised herself. She didn't flinch, because she knew the truth. And when her turn came, she stood. Sierra Carter hadn't stood in a courtroom since she was 19, scared, silent, and watching a judge sentence her ex-boyfriend for domestic battery. Back then, she had let the system speak for her. Not now. Now she had a voice, and she used it. I may not have had money, she said, her voice steady, though her hands trembled. But I never lacked love. My daughters were always fed, they were always held, and they always knew I would do anything to keep them safe. She turned toward the judge, her eyes bright. Yes, I accepted help. Yes, we lived in shelters, but not once did I abandon them. I fought, I worked, I stayed. And what did Marcus do? Her attorney asked. Sierra looked at him, then looked at Marcus, really looked, and saw nothing but a man trying to take what he never wanted in the first place. He left, she said. He didn't pay child support. He didn't call. He didn't come to birthdays or doctor visits or school plays. For 3 years, he didn't even know what Hazel's favorite color was. The courtroom went silent. During the recess, Sierra stepped outside for air. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline crashing down on her like a wave. Gavin followed, handing her a water bottle. You were incredible in there. She looked up at him, eyes glistening. I was terrified, and you still showed up. That's courage. She nodded, letting herself breathe again. For the first time, she felt it too. The trial continued over the next several days. Gavin was called to testify, both as a witness and as a constant in the girls' lives. Mr. Whitmore, Marcus's attorney began during the cross-examination. Do you have any legal claim to these children? No, Gavin said simply. And yet, you've allowed them to live in your home? They didn't live in my home. They built a life with me. Would you call yourself a father to them? Gavin didn't blink. I'd call myself whatever they need me to be. And yes, I love them like my own. The lawyer smirked. Even if that means giving up your own future? Gavin leaned forward. You assume my future doesn't include them. That's where you're wrong. Sierra watched from the bench, her heart pounding. She had known he cared, but hearing him say it like that in public, under oath, was something else entirely. He wasn't just standing by her, he was standing with her. But Marcus wasn't finished. The next day, he took the stand, and he lied. He claimed Sierra had cut him off, had hidden the girls, had poisoned their minds against him. "I've always wanted to be there for them," he said, voice syrupy smooth. But Sierra made that impossible. Sierra couldn't take it. She stood. "Objection," her lawyer started, but Sierra didn't care. "He's lying," she shouted. "He ignored us. He changed his number. I begged for help, and he blocked me." The judge banged the gavel. "Miss Carter, please control yourself." "I will," she said, breathing hard, "but I won't let him rewrite our story." Outside the courtroom later that day, Marcus approached her, alone. "You're making a mistake," he sneered. "You think Whitmore's gonna stay around forever? Guys like that don't marry messes like you. He'll get tired." Sierra looked him in the eye. "The only mistake I ever made was believing you once." She turned and walked away. Gavin was waiting by the car. He didn't ask what Marcus said. He just opened the door, took her hand, and drove them home. The night before the final hearing, Sierra sat with Gavin in the girls' room. Harper was fast asleep. Hazel stirred slightly in her sleep and mumbled, "Daddy." Gavin froze. Sierra turned toward him, eyes wide. "Did she just—" He nodded slowly, emotion thick in his throat. They didn't speak for a moment. Then Sierra whispered, "You are." The final day of the trial arrived. Sierra stood tall, Gavin beside her, her lawyer confident. The judge reviewed every file, every report, every word spoken. Then came the ruling. Based on the evidence provided, the court finds no reason to alter the current custodial arrangement. Full physical and legal custody remains with Miss Sierra Carter. Mr. Marcus Jennings' petition is denied. Sierra couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then Gavin's arm wrapped around her, and the weight of months, years, a lifetime lifted. They had won. Not just the case, but their family. A home of our own. The sunlight filtered through the curtains of the little kitchen, where Hazel and Harper were giggling over pancake batter, each of them holding a wooden spoon, far too large for their tiny hands. Sierra stood by the stove, flipping golden pancakes, her hair in a loose braid and a soft smile on her lips. Gavin entered, wearing a white t-shirt and flannel pajama pants, a mug of coffee in one hand, and sleep still lingering in his eyes. "Morning, Chef Squad," he greeted, placing a kiss on Sierra's cheek. Hazel beamed. "We're making breakfast for you." "Is that so?" "I'm a very lucky man," he said, ruffling Harper's curls. It had been 2 months since the custody case ended. 2 months since Sierra stood in that courtroom and found her voice. 2 months since they returned home, not to uncertainty, but to a life they were building together. The days were simple now, but full of small routines, school drop-offs, homework at the dining table, and dance parties in the living room when no one was watching. Gavin rearranged his schedule to work more remotely and fly out to San Francisco only when necessary. He had chosen love, and he never looked back. Sierra continued her online courses, focusing on early childhood development, something she'd discovered a passion for while raising her girls and volunteering at the community center Gavin helped fund. She still had doubts now and then, but they didn't own her anymore. She had rebuilt her life, brick by brick, with her hands, her grit, and her heart. And Gavin? He had stopped seeing his life in terms of wins and losses. Instead, he measured it in laughter, quiet dinners, sleepy stories, and the smell of fresh coffee as the sun rose. They were a family, for real. One breezy spring morning, Gavin called Sierra out to the garden. She found him standing by a small oak tree they had planted together with the girls the week after the trial ended. He held a letter-sized envelope. "What's this?" she asked, curious. "Open it." She tore it gently along the top and pulled out a set of documents. Her breath caught. It was the deed to a house. Not his mansion. Not his estate. A new house. Smaller. Cozy. In a neighborhood closer to the girls' school. "Gavin," she whispered. "It's in your name," he said. "Well, our names. I figured if we're really building a life together, we should start with something that belongs to all of us." Tears welled in Sierra's eyes. Not because of the house, but because of what it meant. She had never owned anything that felt permanent. Not until now. "I love you," she said simply. "I've loved you since that night on the street corner," he said. "I just didn't know it yet." That night, they sat under the stars, with a picnic blanket in the yard, Harper asleep on Sierra's lap and Hazel curled up against Gavin. Sierra looked up at the sky. "You know," she said quietly, "for a long time, I didn't think I'd get this. A second chance, a safe place, a real family." Gavin wrapped his arm around her, resting his head lightly against hers. "You didn't get a second chance, Sierra," he whispered. "You made one." A few weeks later, the girls helped Gavin pick out flowers and balloons. Sierra thought they were just decorating for a small garden party, maybe celebrating the closing of their new home. She was wrong. As she stepped out into the backyard, dressed in a pale blue sundress, she found Gavin standing by the oak tree, dressed in a navy vest, a nervous smile on his face. The girls were holding handmade signs. "Will you marry our daddy?" Sierra laughed and cried all at once. And when Gavin dropped to one knee, holding a simple, beautiful ring in his palm, her answer came with no hesitation. "Yes. 1,000,000 times. Yes." They were married under that same oak tree, with close friends, a few neighbors, and 2 flower girls dancing down the aisle in pink sneakers. Sierra's dress was secondhand. Gavin wore no tie, and yet it was the most beautiful ceremony either of them could have imagined. Not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. 6 months later, as autumn leaves began to fall, Sierra sat on the porch of their home, sipping tea, a small swell beginning to show beneath her sweater. Gavin came out and sat beside her, wrapping a blanket around them both. "You nervous?" he asked, resting a hand on her belly. She smiled. "A little, but mostly just grateful." Harper and Hazel were playing in the yard, their laughter filling the air. Sierra leaned her head on Gavin's shoulder. "I never thought I'd have a life like this." He kissed her temple and whispered, "You didn't just find this life, Sierra. You fought for it, and now it's ours." As the wind stirred the trees and the late afternoon sun painted gold across the sky, the 4 of them sat in quiet joy. And somewhere deep in Sierra's heart, the girl who once sat on a cold sidewalk with nowhere to go finally found rest, because she was home, at last. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more soulful stories from Wow Family Story.